Russia has just deployed upgraded versions of one of its most feared weapon systems to the front lines. The TOS-1A Solntsepek, a thermobaric rocket launcher capable of covering 40,000 square meters in flames within seconds, is back in action with new anti-drone protection and improved mobility. But here's what makes this system truly terrifying. It doesn't just destroy targets with explosions, it creates a vacuum that pulls the air from your lungs, even if you're hiding in a bunker or armored vehicle. So, why is Russia ramping up production of this specific weapon right now? Why has it increased manufacturing by 250% in the past year? And more importantly, what makes the TOS-1A so psychologically devastating that Western military analysts call it one of the most horrific weapons on the modern battlefield? The answers reveal not just technical specifications, but a shift in how Russia plans to fight in Ukraine and why this weapon has NATO strategists extremely concerned. Because unlike conventional artillery, the TOS-1A doesn't need to hit you directly to kill you. And by the end of this analysis, you'll understand exactly why this system has earned nicknames like the Scorching Sun and Vacuum Artillery, and why dozens of these $15 million systems keep appearing on the front lines, despite significant losses. Russia's TOS-1A isn't just another rocket launcher. It represents a category of weaponry that most Western nations abandoned decades ago due to ethical concerns. To understand why this system generates such psychological impact, we need to examine exactly how thermobaric weapons work and what happens when they detonate. The TOS-1A system consists of 24 launch tubes mounted on a T-72 tank chassis. Each tube contains a 220mm unguided rocket weighing approximately 217 kilograms and measuring 3.7 meters in length. But it's not the size that makes these rockets terrifying, it's the two-stage detonation process. When a thermobaric rocket reaches its target, the first explosive charge ruptures the warhead container and disperses a cloud of fuel particles into the air. This aerosol cloud spreads rapidly across the target area, seeping into buildings, trenches, bunkers, and any confined space. Then, a fraction of a second later, the second charge ignites this fuel cloud, creating a massive high-temperature explosion that consumes all available oxygen in the immediate vicinity. The result is a blast wave unlike anything produced by conventional explosives, according to the U.S. Army Training and Doctrine Command's World Equipment Guide. The primary effect is a long-duration, high-pressure blast wave, which creates a vacuum, then precipitates a reverse wave. This means the explosion doesn't just push outward, it pulls inward, creating a pressure differential that ruptures lungs, collapses blood vessels, and causes internal organs to fail. Here's the critical detail that military analysts emphasize. You don't need to be at the point of impact to be killed. The pressure wave travels through walls, around corners, and into underground positions. Soldiers who would survive a conventional artillery strike in a reinforced bunker can be killed by the overpressure from a thermobaric weapon without the structure itself being destroyed. The temperature at the center of the blast reaches several thousand degrees Celsius, incinerating anything within the immediate kill zone. But the secondary effects extend far beyond. The vacuum created by oxygen consumption can cause asphyxiation hundreds of meters away from the detonation point. The blast wave itself can travel through cave systems, trench networks, and building complexes, making conventional cover ineffective. I want to take a moment to thank our channel members and everyone who supports this content through donations. Even the smallest contribution helps us continue producing in-depth military analysis and keeps improving the quality of these investigations so you can stay informed about what's really happening on modern battlefields. Now, here's where the TOS-1A becomes particularly devastating. It doesn't fire single rockets. The system can launch all 24 rockets in a salvo, lasting just 6 to 12 seconds. This creates a rolling barrage that blankets an area of 40,000 square meters that's approximately 10 football fields, with overlapping thermobaric explosions. Each rocket has an effective range between 400 and 6,000 meters. This might seem limited compared to conventional artillery systems that can strike targets 20 or 30 kilometers away, but the TOS-1A wasn't designed for long-range bombardment. It was specifically developed for close-range devastation of fortified positions, trench systems, and urban strongholds. The system entered service in 2001 as an upgraded version of the original TOS-1 Buratino, which Soviet forces first tested in Afghanistan in 1987. The TOS-1A featured improved range. The original system could only reach 3,500 meters, and upgraded fire control systems, including a ballistic computer, laser rangefinder, and GPS navigation. But here's what Western intelligence agencies find most concerning. The TOS-1A is operated by Russia's nuclear, biological, and chemical protection troops, not regular artillery units. This organizational placement reflects the weapon's doctrinal purpose. It's not meant to simply destroy enemy positions, it's designed to create zones of total devastation where conventional defensive measures become irrelevant. Russian military doctrine employs the TOS-1A in specific tactical situations. First, breaching heavily fortified defensive lines where enemy forces are concentrated in trenches, bunkers, and reinforced positions. The thermobaric effect makes these defenses useless. Second, urban warfare, where the blast waves can clear entire buildings or city blocks of defenders. Third, psychological warfare. The visible and audible effects of TOS-1A strikes create panic among enemy forces. Footage from Ukraine shows exactly how devastating these strikes appear. Multiple massive fireballs erupt simultaneously across a wide area, creating towering flames and visible shockwaves. The phenomenon you see in many videos, what looks like a ring-shaped cloud expanding from the detonation, is called a Wilson cloud or condensation cloud. It forms when the rapid pressure drop from the blast wave causes water vapor in the air to condense momentarily, making the invisible pressure wave visible. But if this weapon is so effective, why has Russia lost so many of them? According to Ukrainian armed forces data, Russia has lost approximately 100 heavy flamethrower systems total since February 2022, including TOS-1, TOS-1A, and the newer TOS-2 variants. Specifically for the TOS-1A, at least 31 systems have been destroyed or captured as of March 2025. This brings us to a critical vulnerability. Remember that maximum range of 6,000 meters? That means the TOS-1A must move dangerously close to the front lines to engage targets often within 2 to 3 kilometers of enemy positions. At this range, the system becomes extremely vulnerable to counter-battery fire, anti-tank missiles, and especially drone attacks. Ukrainian forces have successfully targeted TOS-1A systems using multiple methods. First, counter-battery radar systems detect the rocket launch and calculate the system's position. Second, FPV drones, or first-person view drones, hunt for the distinctive silhouette of the 24-tube launcher. Third, Stugna P and Javelin anti-tank missiles engage the systems during firing operations or while repositioning. In February 2025, Ukrainian drone operators from the 412th Separate Unmanned Systems Regiment destroyed a TOS-1A valued at approximately $15 million. Video footage showed multiple drone strikes hitting the system, with communications intercepts suggesting the entire crew was eliminated. The regiment specifically identified the TOS-1A as a high-value target due to its destructive potential. This vulnerability forced Russia to adapt its tactics. Instead of deploying multiple TOS-1A systems together as originally planned, Russian forces now move one system at a time to the front, reducing the chance of detection. Conventional artillery provides covering fire, while the TOS-1A moves into position, fires its full salvo in under 15 seconds, and immediately withdraws. The entire process from arrival to departure takes less than 3 minutes when executed properly. But here's the strange part about how Russia is responding to these losses. Rather than withdrawing the vulnerable systems, they're dramatically increasing production and adding new defensive measures. In April 2024, Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu announced that production of the TOS-1A had increased by 250%. This massive production surge suggests Russia considers the weapon essential despite the losses. The newer TOS-1A systems now feature several protective upgrades. First, cage armor, sometimes called cope cages, installed above the launcher to deflect FPV drone strikes. Second, the Volnores electronic warfare system, which jams drone control signals and GPS navigation. Third, improved navigation systems that reduce the time needed at firing positions, allowing faster deployment and withdrawal. Most significantly, in July 2025, Russia deployed the first TOS-1A mounted on a T-80 tank chassis instead of the traditional T-72. This might seem like a minor change, but the implications are substantial. The T-80's GTD-1250 gas turbine engine provides 1,250 horsepower compared to the T-72's 840 horsepower. More critically, the T-80 achieves a reverse speed of 11 km per hour, nearly 3 times the T-72's 4 km per hour reverse speed. Why does reverse speed matter? Because after firing a full salvo, the TOS-1A becomes a priority target for enemy counter-battery fire. The ability to rapidly reverse away from the firing position can mean the difference between survival and destruction. The T-80 chassis provides this critical advantage. Russia has also deployed updated variants of the entire TOS family. The TOS-2 Tosochka, introduced in 2020, uses a wheeled Ural 63706 chassis instead of a tracked tank platform. This provides greater road mobility and an extended range of 15 kilometers, more than double the TOS-1A's range. The wheeled configuration also costs less to produce and maintain. The newest development is the TOS-3 Drakon, or Dragon, presented in 2024. This system features 15 launch tubes instead of 24, but fires more powerful TBS M3 rockets with a range of 15 to 20 kilometers. Russian sources claim 18 TBS M3 rockets can match or exceed the destructive area of a full 24-rocket TOS-1A salvo. And what changed everything? Ukraine's response to the TOS-1A threat. Ukrainian forces didn't just defend against these systems, they captured several and put them into service. At least one captured TOS-1A was deployed by Ukraine's 67th Mechanized Brigade during a June 2023 counteroffensive near Crimea in the Luhansk region, using the Russian weapon against Russian positions. Additionally, Ukraine developed its own thermobaric system in response. The Sivalka VM-8, unveiled in January 2025, represents Ukraine's first domestically produced thermobaric rocket launcher. Built on the existing Sivalka multiple launch rocket system chassis, it provides Ukrainian forces with similar capabilities to the Russian TOS-1A, but in a more compact package. This technological competition reveals an important shift in modern warfare. Despite international concerns about thermobaric weapons, both sides in the Ukraine conflict now consider them essential tools for breaking through heavily fortified positions. The psychological and tactical advantages outweigh the production costs and vulnerability risks. But there's the part that almost changed the entire strategic calculation. Western military analysts initially predicted the TOS-1A would be a decisive weapon in urban warfare, particularly if Russia attempted to besiege major Ukrainian cities. The system's ability to clear buildings and underground positions made it theoretically ideal for urban assaults. However, the reality proved different. In practice, the TOS-1A's vulnerability to modern anti-armor weapons and drones made it ineffective in prolonged urban operations. Ukrainian forces adapted their defensive tactics specifically to counter the TOS-1A threat. Early warning systems detect launch signatures, allowing forces to take cover before impact. Anti-armor teams position themselves along likely approach routes. Most importantly, drone operators maintain constant surveillance for the distinctive 24-tube launcher. The result? Russia pre-war inventory of approximately 40 to 48 TOS-1A systems has been reduced to an estimated 50 combined TOS-1A and TOS-2 systems currently operational. This represents significant attrition, especially considering the increased production rates. For every new system delivered, Russia continues losing existing units to Ukrainian countermeasures. Yet Russia continues investing heavily in the TOS platform. Why? The answer lies in the specific tactical situations where thermobaric weapons provide advantages that conventional artillery cannot match. Against fortified trench systems, the type dominating the current front lines in Ukraine, thermobaric weapons can clear entire defensive positions that would require dozens of conventional artillery strikes. Intelligence assessments suggest Russia is preparing for continued trench warfare and fortified defensive operations rather than mobile maneuver warfare. The investment in TOS systems signals an expectation of prolonged grinding combat where breaking through heavily fortified positions will be necessary. The upgraded anti-drone defenses and improved mobility indicate Russia is adapting the weapons to survive in the drone-saturated battlefield environment. There's also the psychological factor. The visible and audible effects of TOS-1A strikes have measurable impact on morale. Intercepted communications from Russian sources frequently mention the panic caused by TOS-1A deployments. Whether this psychological effect justifies the cost and vulnerability remains debatable, but Russian military planners clearly believe it does. From a technical standpoint, the thermobaric technology itself continues evolving. The newer TBS-M3 rockets reportedly use improved fuel formulations that create more powerful blast waves while requiring less total fuel weight. This allows for longer range without sacrificing destructive effect. Electronic warfare integration helps protect the systems during approach and withdrawal. Faster firing sequences reduce exposure time at launch positions. But here's what Western defense analysts find most significant: the international normalization of thermobaric weapons. When the United States employed thermobaric munitions in Vietnam and Afghanistan, international pressure eventually led to their limited use. The current conflict in Ukraine demonstrates that major military powers still consider these weapons acceptable in conventional warfare. There are no specific international laws banning thermobaric weapons in general combat. The ethical concerns arise primarily around their use against civilian populations. The indiscriminate effects, the inability to limit casualties to only military targets, make thermobaric weapons particularly controversial in populated areas. However, in military-to-military combat against fortified positions, current international law does not prohibit their use. This legal ambiguity has allowed both Russia and Ukraine to employ thermobaric systems without significant international consequences. The focus has shifted from whether these weapons should be used to how effectively forces can counter them. Ukraine's development of its own thermobaric capability and deployment of captured Russian systems demonstrates this practical acceptance. Looking at the broader strategic picture, the TOS-1A represents a specific philosophy of warfare. Rather than precise strikes against individual targets, it emphasizes overwhelming firepower applied to entire defensive zones. This approach trades efficiency and precision for guaranteed destruction of everything within the target area. It's a philosophy that works when the attacking force can accept high equipment losses and has sufficient production capacity to replace destroyed systems. Russia's 250% increase in TOS-1A production suggests they can sustain these losses while maintaining operational numbers. The estimated cost of $15 million per system means each loss is significant but not catastrophic. For comparison, a single modern fighter aircraft costs $50 to $100 million. From this perspective, even if Russia loses one TOS-1A every few weeks, the production capacity exists to replace them. The deployment of the T-80-based variant adds another dimension. By utilizing existing T-80 chassis from storage or refurbishment programs, Russia can produce TOS-1A launchers without requiring all new chassis construction. This reduces costs and production time while providing the mobility advantages of the more powerful engine. What does this mean for the future of the conflict? The continued investment in TOS systems indicates Russia expects the fighting to remain focused on fortified positions rather than transitioning to mobile warfare. The weapons are specifically optimized for attacking fixed defenses, not pursuing retreating forces or conducting rapid advances. Their continued deployment and upgrading suggests Russian military planners anticipate months or years of trench warfare. For Ukrainian forces, the challenge becomes balancing offensive operations against the need to defend against TOS-1A strikes. The weapon's limited range means Ukrainian forces can predict likely firing positions any location within 6 kilometers of frontline trenches or fortifications. Concentrating anti-armor assets and drone surveillance in these zones allows for effective defense. But here's where the equation becomes complex. Defending against TOS-1A requires dedicating resources, drones, anti-tank teams, electronic warfare units to that specific threat. These resources then aren't available for other operations. Russia's strategy may be to force Ukraine to allocate defensive assets to counter TOS systems, thereby reducing pressure elsewhere along the front. The TOS-1A also demonstrates the limits of technological superiority. Despite Western countries providing Ukraine with advanced weapons systems, the TOS-1A, a system derived from 1980s Soviet technology, remains tactically relevant. It doesn't require precision guidance, satellite connectivity, or advanced electronics. It relies on volume of fire and the unique properties of thermobaric explosions. This suggests an important lesson about modern warfare. High-tech solutions don't automatically make low-tech weapons obsolete. A $15 million TOS-1A launching unguided rockets can still achieve effects that more expensive precision weapons struggle to replicate. The key is matching the weapon to the tactical situation rather than assuming newer is always better. Final protective fires represent another critical use case. When defensive positions face imminent overrun, the TOS-1A can deliver devastating close-range fires that halt or disrupt attacking forces. At ranges under 1,000 meters, the full 24-rocket salvo creates an impassable kill zone. This capability makes the system valuable for desperate defensive situations, not just offensive operations. So what's the ultimate assessment of the TOS-1A's impact on the conflict? It's neither the wonder weapon some Russian sources claim, nor the overrated liability some Western analysts suggest. Instead, it's a specialized tool, optimized for specific tactical situations. Against fortified positions, underground networks, and concentrated defensive positions, it provides capabilities that conventional artillery cannot match. But its short range, vulnerability to countermeasures, and high visibility make it unsuitable for many battlefield situations. The real significance of the TOS-1A might be what it reveals about modern warfare priorities. Both Russia and Ukraine have chosen to develop and deploy thermobaric weapons despite their limitations and ethical concerns. This suggests that in high-intensity conventional warfare between peer competitors, the ability to break through fortified positions outweighs other considerations. The system's psychological impact also matters beyond pure military effectiveness. Knowing that enemy forces possess weapons that can kill you inside bunkers and armored vehicles affects decision-making and morale. This psychological dimension, difficult to quantify but very real, explains part of why Russia continues investing in these systems despite the losses. Looking forward, we can expect continued evolution of thermobaric rocket systems, longer ranges, better protection systems, faster firing and withdrawal procedures, and possibly guided variants to reduce the number of rockets needed per strike. The TOS-3 Drakon represents one direction, fewer tubes firing more powerful rockets with extended range. Future iterations may incorporate drone launch platforms or autonomous targeting systems. What's clear is that the TOS-1A represents more than just another weapon system. It symbolizes a specific approach to warfare that prioritizes overwhelming firepower and psychological impact over precision and efficiency. Whether this approach succeeds depends not on the weapon itself, but on the broader, tactical, and strategic context in which it's employed. The past 3 years of combat data demonstrate both the weapon's strengths and its critical vulnerabilities. Russia's massive production increase shows they believe the strengths outweigh the weaknesses. Ukraine's development of similar systems and successful counter-tactics shows they've learned to both counter the threat and potentially employ it themselves. This arms race dynamic capability development, leading to countermeasure development, leading to enhanced capability, drives military evolution. For military analysts and defense planners worldwide, the TOS-1A provides important lessons about weapon system design, tactical employment, and the persistent relevance of specialized weapons in modern warfare. High-intensity conventional combat between peer competitors creates demand for specialized systems that might seem obsolete in counterinsurgency or peacekeeping operations. The $15 million price tag, significant losses, and continued production all point to the same conclusion. Major military powers are willing to accept high costs and attrition rates for weapons that provide specific tactical advantages. The TOS-1A isn't changing the overall strategic balance in Ukraine, but it's proving valuable enough in its specific role that Russia considers it worth the investment. And that calculation that this expensive, vulnerable, controversial weapon system remains worth producing and deploying tells us something important about how modern military conflicts are evolving. The lesson isn't that thermobaric weapons are invincible or unstoppable. It's that in warfare between heavily armed opponents with extensive fortifications, the ability to deliver overwhelming firepower against concentrated positions remains tactically essential, regardless of the costs. The TOS-1A Solntsepek will likely continue appearing on battlefields wherever Russia needs to break through heavily fortified defensive positions. Each deployment risks a $15 million loss to drones or anti-tank missiles. But each successful strike can achieve effects that dozens of conventional artillery strikes cannot. And in the grinding mathematics of modern warfare, that trade-off remains acceptable to Russian military planners. What we're witnessing is not the dominance of a superweapon, but the continuing relevance of specialized tools in modern combat. The TOS-1A succeeds not because it's invulnerable or unstoppable, but because it fills a specific niche that conventional weapons struggle to address. As long as that niche exists, fortified positions, trench networks, urban strongholds, the demand for weapons like the TOS-1A will persist, regardless of their limitations or controversies.